And we are live. All right. This week's homework is going to be pretty straightforward because you have a video that you can watch. And it's going to be that same image. So yeah, we'll just spend a minute or a couple minutes talking about the eye, kind of reviewing what we covered already in class and introducing a couple of new concepts here. For this, we'll just talk about the parts and where they are, so that you know where to how to identify them and what you're looking for. Okay, so one of the first landmarks that you notice around the eye is going to be this kind of line right around here. See this? This is going to be the infraorbital furrow. Infra as in under, orbital as in this orbit that becomes visible. Remember, you can find this line, you can find this line, and kind of more or less construct the orbit out of it. Kind of be harder to see here, but just remember that it's basically a tilted square, basically. But the infraorbital furrow is always going to be very visible because it's where the bones of the orbit end and the soft tissue of the eye kind of begin. It always creates this little furrow over there. So that's a very important landmark. And then we have the canthus, right? Or the canthal tendons or ligaments. Okay, and you can always look for that kind of V or Y shape that is going to be visible on the medial side. Remember, medial means middle, as in closer to center line. That's going to be your medial. The lateral is going to be more here, and it's going to be less visible because it connects under the orbit. It connects under the orbit, as in deeper in the tissue. But we have our canthal ligament right here. Okay. Right here, and it kind of continues across. So it's going to be important. What else we want to make note of? The palpebral fissure. The palpebral fissure is really just the eye hole itself, right? It's just this. This is the palpebral fissure. Palpebral fissure. It's a mouthful for me, but it is basically the eye hole on the skin, not the eye hole in the skull. That's called the orbit. What else is going to be very important? We have our superior and inferior palpebral crease, right? So this crease that's created by the tarsal plates, which we should definitely always try to think of them this way. The tarsal plates themselves are going to be our eyelids, okay? Our eyelids are going to be our tarsal plates. Now, when this eye is open, you can't really see it, but you need to remember that the top tarsal plate is the only one that actually moves. It has the levator muscle, pulling it up and down, or forward and backwards, and it is generally, right now, it's folded into that palpebral crease. And there's the fat pads that's sitting around it, creating that kind of fold or wrinkle. But the top, the superior tarsal plate, is going to be 2 to 3 times longer than the inferior tarsal plate. So when the eye is closed, really it's going to come down almost to like here. Okay, and this one's going to stay about the same. Okay. So it's usually going to be that much longer. So keep that in mind for you animators out there who are going to animate eyes opening and closing. Something else that you want to keep in mind of, and we will discuss this again in a few minutes, but just keep in mind that the shape of the eyeball itself is affected by it's going to be affected by the iris, and this whole structure over there, it's not perfectly spherical, but rather has a almost another sphere. If you're modeling this, another sphere kind of embedded in here, or half a sphere, right? Okay, so definitely pay attention to that. And remember, this also affects the shape of your tarsal plates, because this thing, because this area comes out more. Okay, this is your overall your lens over there. Is going to be changing your tarsal plates even when they're completely closed. And think of like REM sleep, when people are dreaming and they have a rapid eye movement. You can see it because it's a form that pushes the tarsal plates above it. And also, never forget that the tarsal plates themselves. And here I'll use maybe a finer brush here. The tarsal plates themselves have a pretty substantial thickness to them. Okay, you can't always see it. And the top is definitely thicker than the bottom. Okay, but there is certainly significant thickness to them that you don't want to neglect whenever you're modeling this. Okay. Let's see what else. So we have the medial canthal tendon or ligament, and we have the lateral. Okay, medial on the inside, lateral on the outside. We have our lacrimal punctum, which is really this point where you see this kind of angle change right here. Okay, and you're gonna have a similar point right here at the bottom. So this point right here is going to be your lacrimal punctum. This is the point where the kind of tarsal plates and all the soft tissue over here kind of shrink wraps to the eyeball itself. Okay, and it has this angle shift. Is very, very important. And you can see that with every eye. What else? We have a membrane called the conjunctiva, very, very thin membrane, and it gives the eyeball itself this glossiness, and it goes over everything. Extremely fine, extremely thin, and just connected from the tarsal plates all the way on top of the eye, and that is the conjunctiva. Okay. Then we have the sclera, which is really the white of the eye, right? The sclera. We have the iris, which is gonna be this area over here on our lens, and we have our pupil, which is going to be that black part, which is just really drops in there like that. When you're modeling this, you can think of that back part. So we have like the lens sitting on top, okay, and it has a mass to it, or rather, it's almost like a half a circle. It's squished, right? But if you took this off, then it would almost be the opposite. It kind of goes in a little bit, okay? Just gonna keep that in mind. So if we have a layer that goes in, and then another layer that goes out on that. Something else to remember, which is actually really, really cool to keep in mind about the eye, and especially how we get those very specific look that brings eyes to life. That reflectiveness of how smooth it is right around here on the lens. Now, the conjunctiva, and it's really the same thing between here and here, but generally we have the sharpest reflections around here because it's smooth. It's just filled with liquid. It's very, very smooth. Over here we have all of those little blood vessels that just go in and out. They disappear. You think of this as like almost like a milk with a bunch of spaghetti in it, and that's basically what those blood vessels do. But whenever they come close to the surface, they're gonna break it up a little bit, so it makes it slightly lumpy enough so that the reflectiveness of the surface is a little bit rougher. And that's why generally when you look at eyes, even over here from far away, the diffusion of the highlight is a little bit less. The highlight is less sharp around on the sclera, and sharper on the lens itself, on the iris, the pupil area. Okay. So yep. all this stuff. Again, one more time, these are going to be the items that I would like you to point out on this particular photograph for next week, which is going to be due before our next class on Tuesday. All right. So we have our medial canthal tendon. Okay. We have our lateral canthal tendon. Okay, somewhere around here. Then we have our palpebral fissure, which is going to be the eye kind of cut itself where the skin ends. The eyeball actually is. We're going to have the superior palpebral crease, which Asian people do not have this because there's another ligament that connects it to the levator muscle. So people of Asian descent, it doesn't get pulled back by that levator muscle, so you're going to have a more fluid shape of this kind of coming down. And that's what gives that very notable, iconic eye look. So we have our infraorbital furrow, which is going to be right here. It's going to be that orbit, basically, and it's always going to be visible right down there. We're going to have our superior tarsal plate, which is that upper eyelid. Okay. Then we're going to have our inferior tarsal plate, which is going to be the lower eyelid. Lacrimal punctum, which is going to be kind of this point here and this point here, right before the eye, ends, or rather where the eyeball goes in, and the tarsal plates and all that soft tissue kind of shrink wraps to the surface. Okay. And you're always going to have an angle change. You're always going to have an angle change there. Let's see. And what else do we want to include for this? Let's include the plica semilunaris as well, which is going to be... the plica semilunaris is going to be this thing right here, which is just a vestigial that third eyelid, if you will, right? It's not really functional anymore, but for animals that do have it working, that third eyelid that closes in and out, that's what that basically is or was at some point, possibly. Okay, plica semilunaris, or semilunaris. Lunaris. I'm gonna add that to the list. And then in terms of the eye itself, okay, we have the conjunctiva, which is going to be that that thin, fine membrane on top of the eyeball. And we're going to have our sclera, I guess it's pronounced, which is the white of the eye, right? And we have our iris, which is going to be the part of the eye that has color for most people. And then we have our actual pupil, which is going to be the dark part. Okay, those are going to be the important things to remember. So I just want you to point these out on this image for next Tuesday. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So good luck, and definitely reach out if you have any questions, and we will see you on Tuesday.